Bismillah al-Amna il-Aqdas. Even though the person I am addressing in this short podcast is actually Iranian public figure whose language skills are quite limited in English, even though he has a tenure job in a university in Canada, nevertheless, I am addressing this short little podcast in English. I would like to challenge Dr. Abdul Karim Soroush to a debate, one on one, at any forum of his own choosing. And this debate will be conducted in English because I believe that it is important that this conversation that I am challenging Dr. Soroush to be recorded for posterity, and that more than just Persian speakers participate in the debate. I would like to debate Mr. Soroush over his lifelong adherence to the rather mediocre critique of Karl Popper, particularly regarding his open society and its enemies, which a whole array of political scientists and scholars, whether Marxist or non-Marxist, whether scholars of Platonism or not, have critiqued for its completely flawed presentation in both of the volumes of that book, whether of Plato, and in the second volume, whether of Hegel or Marx. I am not a Hegelian, but I do very much call myself an eco-Marxist. So I think would be quite apropos, as a self-described Western liberal, that Mr. Soroush be challenged in the English language, especially given the fact that in the last 20, 30 years he has been living in an English-speaking country and has employment at a public institution in Canada whose official language is English, and yet he cannot conduct a public debate or a public conversation in the very language of the host country in which he lives. If Mr. Soroush doesn't know who I am, perhaps people like Yasser Mir Damadi, his disciples, can praise him of the fact that I know all of his sources and I have read all of his books. But I don't fundamentally wish to debate Dr. Soroush over Popper or his Popperism. I want to debate Dr. Soroush over two things. Number one, his rather duplicitous portrayal of Dr. Ali Shariati over the years, particularly given the fact that it has been brought to my attention that given Dr. Soroush's membership in the Anjuman Hojjatiyeh before the revolution, this is the Society of the Proof, which was this anti-Baha'i society that Keyvan Yahyai and I have talked about in the past, that Mr. Soroush has actually gone on record and in either a publication or in a public talk or amongst some of these disciples of his, that he was well aware of the fact that Dr. Ali Shariati was in fact a Babi, a member of the Bayani community, an Azali Babi. This information has come to me from a relatively reliable source, and apparently this information apparently was published somewhere. I have not been able to obtain it, but because the reliability of my source, I tend to believe that this is the case. So I will give the opportunity to Dr. Soroush to explain himself, given that this is the fundamental thesis that I work with, that Dr. Ali Shariati was in fact a Babi. He was a Bayani. He was a member of the Azali Babi community. And that his discourse ultimately is that of the Bayan. So I invite Dr. Soroush to consider this option. He may think that he is living in an ivory tower, but I would advise him that in the ivory tower that he seems to be inhabiting, he doesn't have the ability to have a conversation and especially to debate interlocutors in the English language. He is welcome to bring along with him, if he wishes, a translator. This conversation can be done on the internet, whether through Zoom or Skype or the nth number of applications that exist right now. But I would like to debate him about this, about the Babi pedigree of Dr. Ali Shariati, which Dr. Soroush apparently knows very well about. I would also like to ask him about the last days of Ali Shariati in Southampton, and particularly why Dr. Soroush, of all people, came to the hospital and the morgue in which the body of Dr. Ali Shariati was held. Given the fact that there was no proximate friendship between Dr. Ali Shariati and Dr. Abdul Karim Soroush, There are elements to the story of Dr. Soroush that don't make any sense about why he was there in Southampton at the morgue. Furthermore, given Dr. Soroush's purported liberalism, Western liberalism, Dr. Soroush has very seldom actually critiqued the more excessive and extremist elements of Western liberalism. Dr. Soroush never talks about colonialism, never talks about imperialism, never talks about the genocide of native peoples, even in the Canada that he's been living in, never talks about discrimination, never talks about racism, never talks about any of these things. So why then, if that is the case, is the question, should liberalism, even as a political philosophy in this neoliberal world, be taken seriously? And also, why doesn't Dr. Soroush come at the conversation from the perspective of political economy? Additionally, I would like to query Dr. Abdul Karim Soroush regarding his role, and very central role, in the universities of Iran immediately after the revolution, in the so-called Cultural Revolution that the Ayatollah Khomeini instigated and initiated throughout Iran, which witnessed immense bloodletting and the destruction of the personal and professional lives of countless individuals, and how his centrality and central role in the Cultural Revolution of the university meshes with his portrayal of himself since he has left Iran in the 1990s as being a liberal and wishing to bring political liberalism to Iran, and his conversation about how Islam and liberalism are actually contiguous things. Like I said, I am an eco-Marxist. So my political economy is that of Marx, but tempered by a deep ecology. I'm also a believer, and as Mr. Soroush is probably well aware, if people like Yasser Mirdad appraise him of the fact, I am the current leader of the Babis at this time. So this would be in the best interest of Dr. Abdul Karim Soroush, if his friends are very serious about trying to discredit me, as they have failed so far, to come to the table, bring an interpreter, someone who is versed in the English language and who can also translate precisely. So we are going to have a philosophical conversation. We're not going to have the kind of silly conversations that you have been having in places such as the BBC's Pargar, etc. But this is the conversation that I wish to have with none other than Dr. Abdul Karim Soroush. لا حجة إلى علي قبل النبيل.